The wind whipped across the vast prairie, carrying with it the scent of sage and the distant rumble of hooves. The sun was dipping low, painting the horizon in shades of gold and blood red, when the girl first saw him. She froze, her heart hammering in her chest, every instinct screaming both fear and fascination. His presence was impossible to ignore, a muscular Native American warrior with long black hair flowing like midnight, adorned with small tribal tattoos that hinted at stories untold. Beads and tribal jewelry caught the last glints of sunlight as he moved. Shirtless, his fit, model-like build, commanding the open land like he was born from it. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the folds of her simple dress, stitched from homespun cloth, the only adornment the soft leather belt at her waist. She was the kind of girl whose innocence made her a target, yet whose quiet strength had survived every hardship life had thrown her way. As she stepped closer to the clearing, the warrior's dark eyes locked onto hers, piercing, as if he could see every thought tangled in her mind. "Will it hurt? Will you go slowly?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustle of the prairie grass. Even as the words left her lips, she regretted them, yet they were true to the moment, raw and unguarded. She had heard stories about the Apache, about their fierceness, their code, and the way their warriors moved through the land like shadows. But this one, he was different. There was a calm intensity in his gaze, a promise of something no tale had ever captured. For anyone watching on Western love stories, this was the kind of moment that stopped the heart. And if you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe, because what happens next is something no one could predict. A tale of courage, love, and a secret that could change everything. The girl's name was Leora, a name her mother had whispered like a prayer every night. Her dark hair was braided simply, with a strip of turquoise ribbon threaded through it, catching the sunlight as she shifted nervously from one foot to the other. She had grown up near the edge of the Great Plains, learning to read the sky, to understand the language of animals, and to sense danger even when it hid beneath the quiet of the fields. And yet nothing in her life had prepared her for this encounter. The warrior known to his people as Takadest forward, every movement deliberate, fluid, yet undeniably powerful. The small tribal tattoos along his biceps and chest told stories of battles won and rights endured, while the feather and bead jewelry around his neck whispered of tradition and honor. There was a magnetic presence about him, something that made the air itself vibrate with anticipation. "You are far from the village," Tokota's voice rumbled. Deep and calm, yet layered with a strength that made Leora's knees weak. His words were few, but they carried weight. Every syllable felt as though it were drawn from the land itself, from the soil beneath their feet and the endless sky above. I needed to see," Leora stammered. "I needed to understand why." Her words faltered because she did not fully understand herself. She was drawn to the warrior, to the raw power he radiated, and yet feared what that connection could mean. In the golden light of the prairie, she felt both exposed and safe, the contradiction twisting inside her like a restless wind. Tokota tilted his head slightly, studying her. The corners of his mouth lifted in a faint, enigmatic smile. He did not rush. He never did. Every step, every gesture was measured, controlled, as if he were testing the ground and the air and the heartbeat of the girl before him. He was a protector, a hunter, a force of nature, and yet there was an unspoken vulnerability in the way he observed her, an acknowledgement that life had its limits, even for a warrior such as him. The tension between them was thick, like the summer heat that clung to the tall prairie grass. Leora's eyes darted to his strong arms, the faint glint of metal jewelry against bronzed skin, the way the sun caught each ripple of muscle. She could not tear her gaze away, yet fear made her hold herself back. She had been told that the Apache were unpredictable, dangerous, and yet this one Tokota was unlike any tale she had ever been told. In that moment, the world seemed to shrink. The wind, the prairie, the distant mountains all faded, until only the two of them existed. Leora's thoughts swirled with questions she dared not speak, and yet her heart urged her forward. She had come to this place for answers, for clarity, and perhaps for something more, a spark of courage she did not yet recognize in herself. Tokota finally broke the silence, his voice steady, resonant, almost ceremonial. "The land teaches patience," he said, as if the words carried both warning and comfort. "The heart teaches truth. You must decide which to follow." Leora swallowed hard. She had never felt more exposed in her life, yet never more alive. Her hands tightened around the folds of her dress, the sun painting her features in shades of gold. She felt as though she were standing on the edge of something vast and unknown, the kind of precipice that could change everything. For viewers of Western love stories, this was the kind of scene that would linger in memory, the kind of story that drew a channel's audience in, with promise of romance, suspense, and mystery. And if you haven't yet, now is the moment to click like and subscribe, because Leora and Takeda's journey is only beginning. What starts as a meeting of fear and fascination will soon unfold into a tale no one could have imagined. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the prairie. A hawk circled overhead, its cry echoing across the vast expanse, as if nature itself were holding its breath. Leora took a tentative step forward, then another, until she stood just a few feet from Takeda. He did not move, but his presence pressed against her like the weight of the earth itself. "Why me?" she finally whispered, the question trembling in the air. Takeda's eyes softened, just slightly, revealing the hint of a smile that did not reach his full expression. "Because you see, even among the innocent, there is strength," he said. "And among the strong, there is fear. You're both, and that is rare." Leora's pulse raced. The wind carried 1,000 whispered secrets, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled a sound that seemed to seal their moment in the vast, untamed wilderness. She realized then that she was at the beginning of a story that could never end as she expected. A story that would test every boundary, every fear, every hope she had ever known. And yet, even as questions surged in her mind, one certainty remained. Takeda was unlike anyone she had ever met. The muscular warrior, the tribal tattoos, the long black hair glinting in the sun, and the quiet power he radiated all promised something extraordinary. The prairie itself seemed to lean closer, as if anticipating the moment when their destinies would collide. The moment stretched, heavy with suspense. Every second felt like an eternity, and Leora's heartbeat was a drum in the silence. She knew that the answer to her whispered question, "Will it hurt? Will you go slowly?" was not simple. It would unfold slowly, painfully, beautifully, in ways no one watching on Western love stories could have imagined. And as the first stars began to pierce the darkening sky, Leora and Takeda stood together, two figures poised on the edge of fate, their story suspended in the golden light, waiting for the world to see what would come next. The first night fell like a heavy cloak over the prairie. Leora could not sleep, though her body ached with exhaustion from the long walk across the fields. She sat outside the small cabin she had borrowed from a nearby homestead, her dark eyes tracing the outline of the distant mountains against the star-strewn sky. The firelight flickered across her native-style dress, simple yet elegant, with soft leather accents and subtle beadwork along the neckline. Her hands smoothed the folds of her skirt, but the nervous energy in her chest refused to settle. Takeda remained nearby, just beyond the firelight, his long black hair catching the moon's glow. His bare chest reflected the flicker of the flames, revealing the model-like, muscular contours of his body and the small tribal tattoos that ran along his arms and chest. Each tattoo told a story, whispered secrets of his clan and his own journey, but Leora could not decipher them yet. The tribal jewelry around his neck caught every movement, clinking softly when he shifted. He watched her with quiet intensity, eyes dark and unreadable, yet they seemed to soften whenever her gaze met his. She remembered the first time she had seen him moving through the prairie, the wind carrying his presence before she even noticed him. There had been something almost supernatural about him, the way his muscular frame glided over the uneven terrain, how he seemed part of the land, part of the wind. She had felt fear at first, then curiosity, and finally something she dared not name. "Why are you here?" she asked softly, her voice breaking the silence. She did not want to startle him, yet the question had to be asked. Takeda stepped closer to the fire, the muscles in his arms and chest flexing as he moved. "Because some truths are only revealed when you face them," he said, his voice calm but resonant, the kind of voice that made every word weigh heavy in the air. Did not explain more, leaving Leora to wrestle with the meaning. She thought about her own life, about the village she had grown up in, where rules and traditions were strict and paths were often predetermined. Her father had been a proud man, insisting she follow the expected way of life. But Leora had always felt a restlessness, a pull, toward something beyond the fences and fields. That pull had led her to Tokoda, to this moment, and now she realized the journey had only just begun. In the quiet of the night, she noticed the subtle way he observed the land, the way his gaze lingered on the hills, on the shadows cast by the fire, as if he could read the world in ways she never could. He was a warrior, yes, but also a keeper of secrets, a man bound to a code older than the villages that dotted the plains. And yet there was a vulnerability in his presence, a trace of loneliness that mirrored her own. Leora remembered the whispered stories she had heard about Apache warriors, their fierceness, their cunning, their unyielding sense of justice. But Takoda defied every expectation. He was a muscular Native American warrior, with long black hair, tribal jewelry, shirtless, small tribal tattoos marking his body, and a fit, model-like muscular build that made him appear untouchable. And yet when he spoke, when he moved, there was patience, a gentleness that made her heart race. As the fire crackled, Leora felt a shiver run through her. The prairie was alive with sounds, the rustle of tall grass, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of the wind, but there was something else too, a tension she could not name. It felt as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for the events to unfold. She realized that this encounter was not random, that fate had brought her here for reasons she could not yet understand. In the days that followed, she watched him closely, learning to read the small gestures and signs that spoke volumes, the way he sharpened his spear with meticulous care, the way he examined the horizon before sunrise, the way his eyes softened whenever she laughed or moved. Leora began to understand that Takoda's strength was not just physical. It was rooted in his connection to the land, to his people, to a life that demanded resilience and courage. She herself had her own strengths. Quietly hidden beneath the folds of her native-style dress and the shy, reserved demeanor she had cultivated for years, she was resilient, curious, and surprisingly brave when the moment demanded it. Her dark hair, braided with simple turquoise and leather, swung gently as she moved, and her eyes reflected a growing determination that even she did not fully recognize. One afternoon, while the sun blazed high over the prairie, Takoda took her to a hidden grove, a place known only to him and a few trusted members of his clan. The grove was surrounded by ancient trees, their twisted roots breaking through the earth like veins of time. A small stream cut through the center, its water sparkling in the sunlight, offering life to the flora and fauna that thrived there. "This place is sacred," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Few outsiders are allowed here. It holds the stories of my people and the truths of those who came before." Leora stepped lightly along the stream, feeling the cool water brush her fingertips. She glanced at him, noticing the way the sunlight highlighted the fine lines of his muscles, the tattoos that adorned his body, and the way his tribal jewelry seemed to hum with energy. He was not just a man, she realized. He was a story in motion, a living connection to a past that refused to be forgotten. As they moved deeper into the grove, Leora's curiosity grew, but so did her unease. There were moments when the wind carried voices she could not recognize, shadows that seemed to flicker with intention, and the feeling that unseen eyes were watching their every step. The suspense wrapped around her like the folds of her dress, constant reminder that the world beyond the village was vast, unpredictable, and filled with secrets. Tokoda stopped suddenly, turning to her with eyes that seemed to see everything. "The path you walk now is not the one you expected," he said. "And the choice before you is more dangerous than you realize. Do you have the courage to face it?" Leora swallowed hard, the question settling into her chest like a stone. She realized that courage was not simply the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. She had never felt more alive, more aware of every heartbeat, every breath, every flicker of emotion between them. The grove seemed to close around them as night approached, the shadows stretching long and mysterious. The fireflies began to flicker, tiny sparks of light in the growing darkness, as if the world itself were reminding them of the delicate balance between danger and beauty. For viewers on Western love stories, this was the kind of chapter that left hearts racing, that compelled them to sit on the edge of their seats. And if you haven't yet liked and subscribed, now is the perfect moment. Because the journey of Leora and Dakota was only growing more intense, more unpredictable, and more powerful than anyone could imagine. Leora felt her pulse quicken as she glanced at Dakota, the muscular Native American warrior with long black hair, tribal jewelry, shirtless, small tribal tattoos, and a model-like muscular build, every inch of him commanding the space they occupied. His gaze met hers, unflinching, and in that silent exchange she understood that their story was far from ordinary. It was a story of courage, of trust, of a bond forged under the harsh sun and the wild wind of the prairie. As darkness finally settled over the grove, they built a small fire, the flames casting dancing shadows over the trees and their faces. Leora felt a mixture of awe and fear, excitement and hesitation. She knew the path ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. And she knew that Dakota, with all his strength and mystery, was both guide and challenge in this journey that was just beginning. The night deepened, filled with the sounds of the prairie, the rustle of the wind, the distant howl of a coyote, the quiet gurgle of the stream. Every sound reminded Leora that the world was larger, wilder, and more dangerous than her village had ever revealed. Yet there was also beauty here, raw and untamed, mirrored in Dakota himself, in the way he moved, spoke, and existed within the land. As she finally settled near the fire, her thoughts swirled with questions and anticipation. What truths would the grove reveal?
Oh.
What challenges awaited her? And what was it about Dakota that drew her in? A magnetic force she could neither resist nor fully understand. The first stars glimmered high above, and Leora felt the weight of their story pressing against her chest. A story that would test her, shape her, and perhaps transform her in ways she could not yet imagine. The cliffhanger of the night hung in the air, unresolved, electric, and impossible to ignore. The next chapter was waiting to unfold, but for now, the prairie held its breath. And Leora and Dakota remained, two figures poised on the edge of fate, their destinies intertwined in ways that promised danger, mystery, and an unexpected connection no one could have predicted. The morning light spilled over the horizon, setting the prairie ablaze with gold and amber. Leora woke to the soft murmur of the stream, the water reflecting the first rays of the sun. Her native-style dress clung lightly to her as she rose, the leather straps brushing softly against her skin. She had learned to move quietly in the early hours, the way the wind moved, the way the deer and foxes carried themselves. But no movement in nature compared to the quiet intensity of Dakota, standing just beyond the firelight, his long black hair glinting in the morning sun, his muscular, shirtless form rippling with strength, small tribal tattoos marking him as a warrior of exceptional skill. The tribal jewelry around his neck clinked faintly as he shifted, a subtle reminder of the stories and traditions he carried. "You didn't sleep?" he asked, his voice deep and calm, carrying across the cool air of the prairie. "I tried," Leora admitted, tugging at the hem of her dress. "There is so much to understand, so much I don't know yet." Dakota's gaze swept over the land and then back to her, as if weighing every word before responding. "The land tests those who seek answers," he said. "The heart tests those who dare to follow it." She nodded, unsure whether he meant her heart, his own, or something greater that neither of them could name yet. The prairie seemed alive with tension, every rustle of grass or bird call carrying a warning. Leora felt as though the world was watching, waiting for something to break the fragile balance they had built. The journey ahead was not simple. She had left her village, leaving behind a life dictated by expectations, and had stepped into a world ruled by codes she did not fully understand. Dakota, the muscular Native American warrior with long black hair, tribal jewelry, a shirtless fit, model-like muscular build, and small tribal tattoos, was both guide and challenge, his presence a constant reminder of the strength and danger woven into the land. They set off toward the edge of the canyon, where the cliffs rose like guardians of a secret valley. Leora moved carefully, every step measured, her dress brushing the prairie grass as she followed him. She could not help but notice how he moved, muscles flexing, tattoos shifting with each step, the tribal jewelry on his neck catching the sunlight like fire. There was no hurry, yet they covered ground faster than she could have imagined. The air between them carried unspoken tension, the kind that made the heart race and the mind spin with possibilities. Tokuda finally stopped at a ridge, his eyes scanning the valley below. Danger does not always wear a visible face, he said, his voice low and commanding. Enemies can come as wind, as shadow, even as words. Leora's gaze followed his, taking in the steep cliffs, the winding path that led down into the valley, and the dense trees that hid unknown threats. She felt a shiver run through her, a mixture of fear and excitement. Her native style dress moved lightly with the breeze, and the beads along her neckline caught the sunlight, reflecting the tension in her chest. "Why me?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Because," Takoda said, turning to her with those dark, unwavering eyes, "courage is rare, and curiosity rarer still. The path you walk is not one anyone else could take, but neither is it safe." The first conflict emerged quietly, almost unnoticed. A rustle in the trees, a shadow moving faster than it should, and Takoda's hand went instinctively to the leather strap at his side. His body tensed, every muscle a ripple of readiness. The small tribal tattoos on his arms and chest standing out in the sunlight. He did not move hastily, but Leora could feel the electricity in the air. Danger had arrived, and she realized that survival here depended on more than courage. It demanded instinct. A second figure emerged from the tree line, a young woman with long, braided hair and clothing similar to Leora's, but darker, more practical for the hunt and travel. Her eyes were sharp, her presence confident, and she carried a small pack and a bow. She approached cautiously, eyes flicking to Takoda first, then to Leora. "Who is she?" Leora asked under her breath, stepping slightly behind Takoda, the fear mixing with curiosity. "This is Aida," Takoda said, his voice calm but firm. "She watches the valley and the cliffs. She knows things you cannot yet see." Aida nodded briefly to Leora, her expression unreadable. "You must be careful," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Not all eyes are friendly and not all intentions are pure." The presence of another woman brought a new dimension to Leora's understanding. Aida moved with a warrior's grace, the same confidence, the same awareness, but her eyes told stories of battles Leora had yet to encounter. The conflict deepened, not just the threat from the shadows, but the challenge of trust, the uncertainty of alliances, and the understanding that survival depended on reading people as carefully as the land. As they descended into the valley, Tokuda took the lead, his movements precise and measured. Every step revealed his muscular, shirtless frame, tattoos catching glimpses of light, the tribal jewelry around his neck shifting slightly with each motion. He seemed part of the landscape itself, a living extension of the cliffs and forests. Yet the tension in the air was palpable. Leora followed, adjusting her dress, keeping her hands free to steady herself, feeling the weight of every decision pressing on her. The valley opened up to reveal a hidden settlement, one she could not have imagined. Tents and wooden structures nestled among trees, smoke curling into the sky, a place alive with whispers of stories and secrets. Takoda's expression darkened as they entered, the faintest tension rippling through his muscles. "We are not welcome," he said, his tone low. "They do not trust outsiders, and neither should you." Leora's pulse quickened. The hidden settlement represented both opportunity and danger. Here she could learn, gather strength, and perhaps find answers, but every step carried the risk of betrayal, conflict, or discovery. Her native-style dress felt both protective and fragile as she moved among the unfamiliar faces, trying to read the unspoken rules. Aida guided them to a small clearing where a council seemed to be meeting. The elders, their faces lined with age and experience, regarded them carefully. Murmurs rippled through the group, eyes following every movement, every gesture. Takoda spoke softly to Leora, explaining the tensions and histories she had yet to grasp. The valley had been contested land, a place where alliances shifted like the wind. The elders' judgment was absolute, and every word spoken could carry consequences that stretched far beyond their sight. The main conflict began to take shape. Outside threats loomed from rival clans and lawless outsiders, while internal tensions simmered within the settlement itself. Leora realized that survival depended not just on physical strength, as displayed in Takoda's muscular, shirtless form, tattoos, and tribal jewelry, but also on wisdom, strategy, and the courage to confront both known and hidden dangers. As night fell, the tension only grew. Fires burned along the edges of the settlement, casting flickering shadows on tense faces. Leora felt the weight of every decision, every glance, every whisper. Tokuda remained close, his presence a constant reminder of both strength and safety, yet the threat from unknown enemies persisted. The conflict had many layers: physical danger, political intrigue, personal trust, and the growing emotional bond between Leora and Tokuda, the muscular Native American warrior with long black hair, tribal jewelry, small tribal tattoos, and a fit, model-like muscular build. Aita remained a mystery, a figure of both support and challenge, her motives as concealed as the valley itself. Leora understood that her own role was growing, that her choices mattered more than ever, that courage meant stepping forward even when the path was unclear. The chapter closed with the distant howl of a wolf, echoing across the valley, a sound that seemed to foreshadow the trials ahead. Leora felt the pulse of the land in her veins, the urgency of every moment pressing down, the suspense growing with each heartbeat. The main conflict was clear: survival, trust, and the challenge of facing forces both seen and unseen, with stakes that threatened not only life, but the fragile bond forming between her and Tokuda. The night left questions unanswered, the tension unresolved, and the prairie alive with mystery, danger, and possibility. For viewers of Western love stories, the story was impossible to ignore every glance. Every movement, every whispered word carried suspense, intrigue, and the promise of surprises no one could predict. Leora adjusted her dress near the fire, feeling both small and capable, aware that her courage and intuition were now tested as much as Tokuda's strength and skill. The cliffhanger lingered, as deep shadows danced across the valley and the distant howl of wolves reminded them all that nothing in the land was certain, and every choice carried weight beyond the moment. The wind howled through the valley as night settled like a heavy blanket over the hidden settlement. Leora adjusted her native-style dress, the beads along her neckline catching the faint glow of the fires. Her dark eyes scanned the shadows, alert to every movement, every rustle of leaves, every whisper carried by the wind. The tension was unbearable, like the calm before a storm, and she could feel her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Tokuda remained close, his long black hair swaying slightly in the breeze, his muscular, shirtless form tense and ready. Small tribal tattoos marked his body like silent warnings, and the tribal jewelry around his neck clinked softly as he shifted his weight. He was a protector, a force of nature, yet there was something almost vulnerable in the way he watched her, as if her safety meant as much to him as his own life. Aida appeared from the shadows, her movements silent and precise. She carried a bow across her back and a satchel of supplies, her dark hair braided tightly to keep it out of her face. Her eyes met Leora's briefly, sharp and calculating, before she moved closer to Tokuda. "The outsiders may come tonight," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They have been watching. They know we are vulnerable." Leora swallowed hard, the words settling like a stone in her chest. She had known danger was close, but hearing it spoken made it feel immediate, urgent. Native-style dress felt heavier somehow, as though it carried the weight of the decision she was about to face. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of fear and anticipation swirling inside her. Tokuda's gaze swept the perimeter of the settlement, every muscle in his fit, model-like muscular body taut. The small, tribal tattoos along his arms seemed almost alive under the flickering firelight, each one telling a story of battles fought and victories won. "We will not wait," he said, his voice low but carrying authority. "If they come, we meet them on our terms. The land favors those who move with it, not against it." Leora nodded, gripping the folds of her dress tightly. She had learned from him, from Aida, from every shadow and sound around her. She understood that courage meant more than facing danger, it meant anticipating it, preparing for it, and trusting instincts that had grown sharper than she ever imagined. As night deepened, the first signs of movement appeared. Shadows shifted at the edges of the trees, figures slipping between trunks, quiet as the wind but deliberate in their approach. Leora felt her pulse spike. She could see the glint of metal, hear the faintest scrape of leather, and her mind raced with the possibilities. Tokuda remained silent, his muscular, shirtless frame a living shield, every sense attuned to the threat. The tribal jewelry around his neck clinked with subtle movements, a rhythm in sync with the quiet drum of the approaching danger. Aida positioned herself slightly ahead, her bow-drawn eyes scanning the darkness. "They are scouts," she whispered. "They do not come alone." The tension tightened like a coiled rope. Leora's dark eyes flicked between Tukoda and the approaching shadows. She understood instinctively that this was more than a mere skirmish. It was a test. A confrontation that would determine who controlled the valley and whose courage would survive the night. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the shadows. The figures emerged, moving with the confidence of those who believe themselves unseen. Tukoda stepped forward, his muscles rippling under the moonlight, his long black hair flowing as he assumed a stance that was both protective and commanding. His tribal tattoos seemed to shift with his movements, small marks of strength and history that made him appear almost unstoppable. Leora stood close behind him, her native-style dress rustling softly as she positioned herself near the edge of the firelight, ready to react, ready to follow his lead. The leader of the outsiders, a tall, posing figure with a cruel gleam in his eyes, stepped forward, clearly underestimating the resolve of the settlement. "Step aside," he demanded, voice loud and sharp. "This land will belong to those strong enough to claim it." Tukoda's dark eyes met his, unwavering. "Strength is not measured by violence alone," he said calmly. "It is measured by honor, courage, and the protection of those who cannot protect themselves." The words hung in the air like fire before the storm. Leora felt a shiver run down her spine. This confrontation was more than a clash of men, it was a battle of wills. A test of every skill, every lesson, every ounce of courage she had gained since stepping into the valley. Aida's arrow sliced through the night with precision, striking a tree near one of the outsiders. The sound was sharp, a warning, and the figure stumbled, revealing the vulnerability of those who relied on intimidation alone. Leora's heart raced. She realized that survival meant not just bravery, but strategy. And she watched Tukoda, the muscular Native American warrior with long black hair, tribal jewelry, shirtless, fit, model-like, muscular build, and small tribal tattoos, as he moved with fluid precision, his every motion a combination of strength, awareness, and history. The battle unfolded quickly, each second stretching with tension. Shadows moved between trees, fires blazed, and the sounds of combat echoed across the valley. Leora kept her eyes on Tukoda, learning from every gesture, every calculated strike, every protective movement. She felt a growing bond with him, a connection forged under pressure, under fear, under the certainty that the night could decide everything. And yet, the conflict was not only external. Within the settlement, murmurs of doubt and fear began to surface. Some questioned the wisdom of confronting the outsiders, while others whispered about old rivalries, secrets, and betrayals long buried. Leora realized that the main conflict extended beyond the physical battle. It touched the heart of trust, loyalty, and courage. Every choice mattered. Every glance could mean survival or disaster. As the night deepened, a sense of suspense settled over the valley like fog. Leora adjusted her dress, feeling the rough leather of her belts, the beads along the neckline, the weight of responsibility pressing against her. She understood that the battle outside mirrored the struggle within, the challenge of trust, the test of courage, and the growing unspoken bond between herself and Tukoda, whose muscular, tattooed body moved with a grace and power that seemed almost otherworldly. Aida appeared beside her again, eyes sharp in the firelight. "We cannot hold them forever," she said quietly. "They will regroup and we must be ready." Leora nodded, absorbing every word, every movement, every sound. She felt the tension coiled tighter with each passing moment, the suspense reaching a near breaking point. The night had become a crucible, testing not only physical skill, but emotional resilience, courage, and trust. Tukoda turned briefly to her, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Prepare yourself," he said softly. "The night is not yet over, and what comes next will demand everything you have." Leora took a deep breath, her fingers brushing against the beads of her dress as she stood taller, feeling the strength of the land, the protection of Tukoda, and the knowledge that courage was built in moments like this. The battle had not ended, the danger had not passed, and yet she knew that she was not alone. The suspense thickened, the climax building. Every shadow, every whisper, every movement pulling them closer to a confrontation that would change everything. From the treetops, eyes watched. From the cliffs above, silent figures observed the unfolding scene. The valley seemed alive with anticipation, every creature, every gust of wind, every flicker of fire contributing to the tension that held Leora, Dakota, and Aida in a delicate balance. The climax was near, but the outcome remained uncertain. Leora's heart pounded in rhythm with the crackle of the fires. Her dark eyes shifted to Dakota, the muscular Native American warrior with long black hair. Tribal jewelry, shirtless, small tribal tattoos, and a fit, model-like muscular build. He was ready, every fiber of his being poised for what was coming, yet his gaze softened slightly when it met hers. She realized that their bond built through trust, courage, and shared danger was now as vital as the strategies they had planned and the weapons they carried. The night carried them forward, the suspense peaking with every sound, every shadow, every heartbeat. The outsiders regrouped, moving with silent determination. The elders watched, their faces tight with concern, as the first hints of the final confrontation drew near. The stakes were immense, not just survival, but the fragile trust, the unspoken bond, and the chance for something unexpected to emerge from the darkness. Leora adjusted her dress once more, feeling the cool night air against her skin. The beads and leather straps, the folds of her skirt, all seemed to anchor her in the moment, reminding her that courage was more than a word. It was action, intuition, and connection. The climax was almost upon them, the suspense unbearable, and the valley held its breath for what would come next. And in that moment, Leora knew the night would change everything. Not yet resolved, not yet revealed, the tension remained a storm waiting to break. A story poised on the edge of destiny, a path toward the kind of ending no one could have imagined. The first light of dawn stretched across the prairie, spilling gold and rose over the valley. The battle of the night before had left the settlement shaken but intact. Leora adjusted her native-style dress, the leather and beadwork soft against her skin, and felt the tension of the night slowly release. Her dark eyes scanned the clearing, noting the footprints, the scattered leaves, the signs of those who had tried to challenge them and failed. The land was quiet now, the wind gentle, carrying a sense of renewal. Dakota stood near the edge of the fire's ashes, his long black hair catching the first rays of the sun. His muscular, shirtless body gleamed with sweat from the previous night. Small, tribal tattoos and tribal jewelry, accentuating every powerful curve and line of his fit, model-like frame. He had moved with the grace of a predator and the wisdom of a leader. And now the tension in his dark eyes softened as he watched Leora. Every glance between them carried the unspoken bond that had been forged under danger, trust, and courage. Aida moved beside them, her bow slung over her shoulder. Her presence had been invaluable, guiding them through the shadows, the ambushes, and the uncertainty. Her eyes softened as she studied Leora, and for the first time, Leora felt a sense of calm settle into the valley. Together they had faced the outsiders, the shadows, and the silent tension within the settlement itself. And now the relief of survival filled the air like sunlight overdue. Leora's thoughts drifted to the elders of the settlement, their faces lined with years of wisdom and experience. The council had watched every moment of the confrontation, weighing decisions, testing courage, and measuring trust. Now, as the dawn painted their faces with light, they nodded at Dakota and Leora with quiet respect. The settlement had survived not through brute force alone, but through courage, unity, and the careful balance of strength and wisdom. The morning air carried a sense of clarity. Leora adjusted the folds of her native-style dress and moved closer to Dakota. "I didn't know I could feel so alive," she whispered. "So much fear, but also hope." Dakota's dark eyes softened, his muscular, shirtless frame radiating strength and calm. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is the willingness to face it, to stand tall, and to protect what matters." The tribal jewelry around his neck clinked softly as he moved closer, the small tribal tattoos on his chest and arms catching the sunlight. Leora felt the connection between them deepen, built on shared danger, mutual respect, and the growing understanding that the land itself had tested them and found them worthy. The settlement slowly came alive around them. Villagers emerged from the cabins and tents, cautious at first, then with smiles as the threat had passed. Leora saw familiar faces she had once feared would never trust her, now nodding, acknowledging her bravery. Even those who had doubted her strength could not deny the courage she had shown. Her dark eyes reflected pride, relief, and a quiet joy that she had never experienced before. Aita approached Leora. Her expression softened. "You have proven yourself," she said, "not just in battle, but in spirit. The settlement will remember this day, and so will the land." Leora nodded, the weight of those words settling into her heart. Her journey had begun as a test of courage, and now it had become a story of connection, trust, and the resilience of the human spirit. The main conflict that had driven the story, the threat from outsiders, the tensions within the settlement, and the personal fears each character had faced, began to resolve naturally as the day unfolded. Leora understood that resolution was not only about survival, but also about the choices made in the shadows, the quiet courage, and the moments where instinct met wisdom. Tokoda's strength, his muscular Native American warrior presence, his long black hair, tribal jewelry, shirtless, fit, model-like, muscular build, and small tribal tattoos had been vital, but so had Leora's intelligence, her awareness, and the courage to step forward when it mattered most. As they walked through the settlement, Leora noticed the small acts of repair and renewal. Tents were patched, fires rekindled, and the elders began their quiet work of rebuilding trust. Villagers whispered stories of the knight's bravery, and Leora felt a sense of belonging she had never known. She realized that the journey was not just about facing danger, it was about earning a place in a world larger than herself, one that required both courage and heart. Tokoda guided her to a quiet spot overlooking the valley, the wind teasing strands of his long black hair. His muscular, shirtless frame, with small tribal tattoos and tribal jewelry, stood as a testament to strength and protection. Leora adjusted her native-style dress, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin and the presence of someone who had become her anchor in the storm. "You have changed this place," Tokoda said quietly, "not by force, but by courage, curiosity, and heart. You have shown that strength can take many forms." Leora looked into his dark eyes and saw the reflection of her own. Journey the fear faced, the courage discovered, the trust earned. The subplots of the story, the tensions with the outsiders. The uncertainty within the settlement, Aita's watchful guidance found resolution in subtle ways. The outsiders had retreated, their plans foiled not by violence alone but by strategy, unity, and foresight. The settlement itself was stronger, bound together by shared trials and the courage of those who had faced danger, with hearts open and minds clear. Aita's guidance had revealed the importance of wisdom and observation, and Leora had proven herself a vital part of this new balance. As the sun rose higher, the prairie stretched endlessly beyond the valley, filled with the promise of new beginnings. Leora felt the wind against her native-style dress, the beads and leather soft against her skin, and understood that she had grown, not just through the trials faced, but through the connections formed, the courage discovered, the bond she had forged with Tokoda. He stood beside her, muscular, shirtless, long black hair catching the sunlight. Tribal jewelry clinking softly, small tribal tattoos visible across his fit, model-like body. His presence was commanding, protective, yet gentle in a way that allowed her to breathe freely for the first time in days. The tension of the past nights had dissolved, replaced by understanding, respect, and a quiet joy. "You see now," Tokoda said, "that danger is only part of life. Courage, heart, and trust are what shape the world around you." Leora nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle on her chest. She realized that the valley, the settlement, and even the land itself had been testing her not to punish her, but to show her the strength that lived within. The resolution also brought reflection. Leora looked around at the villagers, the elders, Aita, and Tokoda, and understood the lessons she would carry forward. Courage is not loud or brash. It is quiet, persistent, and rooted in understanding. Strength is not just physical. It is in connection, in protection, in the choices made in the moments when fear threatens to take over. And love, even the unspoken bond forming between her and Tokoda, is built through shared trials, mutual respect, and the willingness to trust when uncertainty looms. As the day brightened, the valley came alive with renewed energy. Leora and Tokoda walked among the villagers, observing the repair, the laughter, the cautious smiles that had returned after the tension of the night. Aita followed, keeping watch, but allowing herself a rare smile. The subplots, threats, tensions, fear, and doubt had found a natural resolution without unnecessary conflict. Every character had grown, learned, and discovered courage in their own way. The final moments of the day brought a sense of peace. Leora adjusted her native-style dress, the beads glinting in the sunlight, and felt the warmth of connection, courage, and hope. Dakota stood beside her, the muscular Native American warrior with long black hair. Tribal jewelry, shirtless, fit, model-like, muscular build, and small, tribal tattoos. A living embodiment of strength, wisdom, and protection. Together, they looked out over the valley, the prairie stretching endlessly beyond, filled with possibility. For viewers of Western love stories, the ending was both satisfying and memorable. The suspense had been intense, the conflicts deep, and the resolutions earned through courage, intelligence, and connection. Leora's journey from fear to trust, from uncertainty to courage, from isolation to belonging offered key takeaways about the power of heart, the importance of bravery, and the strength found in bonds forged through adversity. As the sun set over the valley that evening, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Leora and Dakota stood together. The wind carried whispers of the past and promise of the future. The fires of the settlement burned steadily, and the land itself seemed to hum with approval. The journey had begun with fear and questions, had climbed through danger and uncertainty, and now rested in a place of hope, trust, and quiet joy. Leora adjusted her native-style dress one last time, taking a deep breath of the prairie air. She looked at Dakota, the muscular, shirtless warrior, tribal jewelry glinting, tattoos visible, and felt the strength, courage, and connection that had guided her through every moment. The story had reached its resolution, but the lessons, the bonds, and the sense of wonder would remain forever. The valley was safe, the settlement stronger, the bond between Leora and Dakota unbroken, their courage and trust a testament to the human spirit. And as the stars began to twinkle over the prairie that night, the story closed naturally, leaving the audience with reflection, excitement, and the satisfaction of a journey well completed. The story of courage, trust, love, and survival had reached its happy ending, but the lessons of the land, the people, and the bond between two hearts would echo through the valley forever.